Right.
Time being 4:30, I'd like to call the finance personnel meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda? There being none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, first on the agenda is an ordinance to amend chapter 12 of the municipal code, reflect the state's general licensing requirements and allow for refunds of licensing fees in the event of a business sale. Nicole?
You read in your packet, we had a couple of businesses that were changing hands pretty soon after the licensing period. So the alcohol, amusement device, cigarette sale licensing period is from July 1st through June 30th. So we had New London Travel Plaza, CNR Waterfront, and the bottle shop all changing hands pretty soon after that new licensing year, so July 1st. So in the example of the CNR Waterfront, the current owner, the seller, she is selling CNR Waterfront. It's closing on July 16th. So she came in, paid her licensing fee for the upcoming year to the tune of $725. Then she asked, now this new guy, he came in, he got his permits in order for August. She said, can I get a refund of what I've paid prorated based off of these, 2 weeks that I'm going to be able to use these licenses. And the way the code is currently, I can't refund her. So if you guys feel that that should be refunded to her, or in general to businesses that are selling, that's where I have the proposed ordinance. So the proposed ordinance is changing the code to allow for refunds in the event of a sale. So we don't really want to go down the path of somebody goes out of business and then they're trying to get their money back. This would be in the event of a sale and then somebody coming in and making us whole basically on the licensing cost. So in these examples, all these businesses are coming in and getting the exact same license for the year. State requires that they are prorated for the rest of the year. So they're getting it prorated, but the seller is not getting it prorated. So what I included in the packet was, a change to allow for that. We also weren't in compliance with state general licensing requirements, so I updated that. Since then, I talked to Sue today, and she thought maybe there should be a time limit on this, so we're not doing this 1 month before it would change over. So I don't know. She thought 3 months. I thought 5 months, 6 months. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that.
So basically, do you understand what she's trying to convey is that we have people come in for the business license. We already are made whole by that first business, and then as far as we are concerned as a city, we're not losing any money by refunding money. As Nicole and I talked a little bit, it's kind of like a business that's been here a really long time, and then they sell their business to somebody. It's almost like slapping them in the face before they leave and saying, no, you can't have your money back. And it's a lot of money. How much is it?
700, and in the case of CNR Waterfront, it's $725. So that she can use that license for 2 weeks, and she'd be a fool not to, apply for the license, because if something happened with the closing or the sale and it fell through, she won't want to not have a license. So we definitely want to encourage people to, and we want to encourage that new business to come in and get their ducks in a row. But the way it is standing now, you're kind of penalizing the seller because she's she's out that money and the new buyer is paying us that money at a prorated cost. So, I mean, I'm fine either way. I just, you know, to give an answer to that seller.
I agree with Sue that there should be a time limit though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you guys,
Selling a month early and then all of a sudden you guys have to do all the paperwork to refund them $50.
right. So I don't know what you think, what I gave you in paper in a hard copy was 5 months. So then by November, if the business sold, then they're just gonna, that's the cost of the sale. I mean, if you think 3 months, if you think 6 months, you know, whatever you guys think.
I would think 3 should be long enough.
Would it be automatic or would it be as requested?
So when I had the conversation, good question. I had a conversation with someone from the Department of Revenue, and his suggestion was that it be automatic or at least uniform across businesses. Because you don't want to get into the, you know, oh, well, Chong requested the money and Depot Street Station didn't, then you're giving it to her, but not to him. So what Department of Revenue suggested is that they relinquish their license. So when they come in and sign over their license, and that kind of, then they turn back in their license, that's gonna start the process. And that they have some sort of documentation, like an offer to purchase or a closing disclosure or something like that. So, you know, the process would probably be when the buyer came in, that I would reach out to the seller and tell them they're not getting a refund until they come back in with that piece of paper and give it to me.
And the new person moving in takes out a license and pays.
Yes, so in the event of CNR Waterfront, that person came after our June meeting, so we have to publish it for 15 days prior to the council meeting. He missed that for July, so he's on the license list for August, published in the Press Star for 15 days prior to that. And then his license would be effective August 11th. And then he applied for a provisional license to get him from closing date till August 11th. So yeah, he's already come in and already paid the money.
Is he prorated or does he pay for the?
Yes, and the state mandates that they're prorated. So his cost is, you know, from August 11th on, it has to be prorated per Department of Revenue.
To go back to Tim's other question about should we make it mandatory or do they have to request it? It'd probably be better if it's just mandatory, not that someone didn't know about it and then 3 years later they come back, oh, I didn't know about it, I want my refund. You don't have to deal with that stuff. It's just automatic.
Right. So, if, you know, we say, okay, you know, we got another application in, bring your license in and we'll get that processed. Because yeah, that's something the Department of Revenue brought up, that you don't want to be dealing with this retroactively as well.
Is 3 months enough time for you to do all your stuff and everything?
You're saying, so if they set in the months of July, August and September, if the business changes hands,
Right.
yeah, that's fine by me. I mean, however you feel is, you know, a service to your business owners or doing right by your business owners or by the sellers, that is fine by me.
So by that motion, you would be telling businesses, if you don't sell within the first 3 months, you're not getting any money
You're just
back.
eating the cost.
I would go 6.
Maybe
Six.
one.
I mean, like a half a year paid a full
Yeah,
fee
that's-
type thing.
Yeah, I would think
I'd
6.
actually go probably 6
But they
months.
got to eat the cost anyway. Yeah, maybe 6 months, give them more time.
I mean, this
After a half a year, you've already paid your, you know,
yeah,
you've made your money back.
covered
I
your
wouldn't go
legal
3 months, you
proceeds
know.
and all
Yeah.
of those things.
Yeah.
inspection.
It
In the case of Chong, it's kind of a special, you know, she had to renew to keep her license for 2 weeks. If you're doing 6 months, it's like, you don't think you're gonna sell 6 months down the road. You know, what we're trying to fix is this little gap.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think 3 months would be enough, just because you would know, hey, I'm selling, you know, I got 90 days or whatever, you know, we're closing.
all of these that are listed, they did actually happen pretty quick and in Depot Street and CNR Waterfront, they both were like, well, it wasn't really, it all happened really fast from the time that they applied from the license until, till it was issued. And the case of the bottle shop, I mean, they still haven't closed yet, and that was supposed to close in May. So that just keeps getting pushed back. And he doesn't want to pay for a full year of his license and then close next week either. So
I don't know. I think 6 months just because the city is made whole no matter what.
Right.
Because a new license automatically, they have to pay the prorated portion. We really should be automatically giving the previous owner back
yeah.
the money they didn't use.
Is it better for you in a shorter period or longer period? Which makes it easier for you?
I don't really care. I mean, I initially was thinking 6 months because that was the calendar year, and then it would be tax season.
Yeah.
And, like, okay, as long as, it's all wrapped up by the time tax season starts, then
And the end of
I
our
didn't really care
fiscal
about the work.
If it makes it easier for you at 6 months, I would say,
Yeah.
the 6 would work out better for you than,
Yeah,
I don't
I
have any
guess
option
5
for
would
that.
get me, then I don't have to worry about it during during a presidential election, if it was before November 1st,
okay. Sure, I would,
and that's 5 months.
so we want to look for refunding the license fees in the event of a business sale within 6 months? Is that what we're looking for?
I mean, whatever you guys think, I can make work. I mean, and this isn't gonna be this was probably very odd that you had this many in this amount of time. And I think anything you do is going to be more than other communities are doing. Like most communities are like, nope, no refund, this would be kinder to the sellers than most communities.
Yeah. I guess, ready for a motion? You want a motion on it?
Yeah.
I would make a motion to amend the event of a business sale within 6 months.
Okay,
And then to reflect the state general licensing requirements that were added.
Okay.
I have the motion.
okay.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks.
Next up is the assessment process presented by Adam, oh boy, Survey?
Survey.
Got her. Real estate appraiser, Survey Group and Company. Adam?
So Judy asked me to come today to talk about some things that we already discussed at board review. I noticed some of you overlap with that board as well. So we just, for those of you that's not a part of that, we just held board review in late May, and that represents the last day for property owners to object to this tax year, their assessments. So the 2021 assessments, the local assessments, not manufacturing, are wrapped up for this year. But with that, I'm always kind of looking at where our numbers fall and what the state's also analyzing that. And I wanted to make you guys aware of where we stand in terms of a revaluation. If you recall, we had a citywide revaluation in 2017. The work took place during 2016 and 17, and we wrapped up in 17. And what a revaluation is, it's when we go through the entire city, number one, to make sure our records are accurate. And in this case, in 2017, we did a full interior. So we did try to get into each property, and we got into just under 90% of the properties. So number one is, checking, make sure all the records are correct. But then number two is updating the assessing model that we use to better represent the real estate market at that time. So, there's many factors that go into that model. But what New London's also doing is compliance-based assessments, meaning once that revaluation is completed in 2017 and that model is set, we use that model each year going forward, and we don't adjust to chase the market however it's going. And in this case, if you kind of think about it, it's definitely gone up since 2017. What the state's concerned with is they say we're a full market value state, but they do allow us to assess with the caveat that we can be within a percentage of market value, and that percentage is 10%. So if they're looking at a major class of assessment, whether that be residential, commercial, vacant land, once in every 6-year period, it has to be within 10% of what they deem as market value, or what sales are showing as market value in the area. This year, I'm projecting us to be at 91%. Last year's actual was 94.9%. So obviously, we're getting close to that threshold of the 90%, and that's why I'm bringing it up to you today. If things continue, we're looking at we're still in compliance right now at 91%. Next year, we're going, the ratio is moving at a clip about 3 to 4% a year. So in 2022 would be our first year out of compliance. A lot of what I'm referencing also comes from the property assessment process guide for municipal officials. I did send that to Judy. I think it was included with your packet. That is definitely,
This is what it looks like.
yeah, that is definitely something that at this point, page through it and be aware of it. And once we get closer to the, a revaluation project, you guys are probably going to want to know this pretty good about what the process is recommended from the state side of things. But anyway, if we fall out of compliance next year in 2022, that starts the clock on the state requiring us to have a revaluation. They say within 6 years, but there's kind of a process to that. 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, the first 4 years, you're just out of compliance. And in that fourth year, they'll send the first notice of non-compliance. 2026, you'd get the second notice of non-compliance. And then if you're not within compliance by November of 2027, that they would order a state supervised assessment for 2028. So I know that seems like a long ways out. You never want to get to a state supervised assessment. So we kind of back up in that process and try to target that fourth year. And the reason being, if you're doing that fourth or fifth year, which would be 2026 in this case, if something were to happen with the reval, it get delayed or the market turns and, the ratios don't come in, you still have another year before the state supervised assessment is going to come down on you. So you're targeting that fourth year rather than waiting to that fifth or sixth year when you're starting to get up against the state requirements. I didn't really get into the ratio, but what the ratio basically is all arm's length sales that occur in a municipality in comparison to the current assessment. And then you just kind of do a bell curve on that, or an average. So when I'm saying I'm projecting it to be at 91%, I'm saying all property types based on the state's analysis of the sales in comparison to assessment. Most properties are assessed at about 9% under what their market value is. If you kind of think back to the last recession, and I did include a copy of this sheet in your packet as well. It's called the major class comparison. And this is what they use to deem whether you're in compliance or not. And it shows the prior 6 years and kind of the trends that have been happening. Going into 2017 or going into 2016 is when I think you guys made the bid for revaluation the last time. You were technically in compliance. But at that time, I think there were some questions about the accuracy of the data. And then there was also a lot of changes that were applied to properties as a result of the recession that may not have needed to occur. So there was more correction things that motivated the last revaluation. But if you think about it, 2006 was a high point, 2008, it was a high point of the market. Then we had this recession. Then it turned and started appreciating, but at a slow clip. We decided to have a revaluation. We had that done. And then this hyper, appreciation of the last several years kicked in. So if you trail the numbers, you had the last revaluation when you were still in compliance, but there's a clear arc of high values, declining values. we were appreciating, but then we did this reval and then they really appreciated even more. Generally speaking, revaluations, there's usually about 7 to 10 years between the two, between revaluations occurring. Some of my municipalities that I do are much longer than that, and they're kind of pinging between the 10% threshold as the market goes with this recession going down and then coming back up. As far as types of revaluation, there's the full interior, which is what we did last time. That's the most expensive. Exterior only would be basically checking all the data, but not attempting to inspect the properties from the interior. That'd be the mid kind of grade in terms of cost. And then there's the cheapest, which would be the market update, which is strictly only doing adjusting the model based on statistics and not doing any legwork as far as what the data, the records are concerned. And I think anticipating your question, you can do kind of like mini revaluations where you identify a market segment. And if that market segment's the major driver of what's causing you to be out of compliance, you can just do all, say, single family homes that are 10 years old. We can just reval those. So you can do certain parts of the city if you identify those as the reason for you being out of compliance, but then you can, do those different levels where it's more applied citywide, market update, exterior, and then full interior.
What's the price of lumber going to do to the reval? When would be the best time to do the revals? Would it be after a while when the lumber prices come back down? Because people that built these houses, building a 300,000, say, for example, $300,000 house. And a year ago, the lumber was cheaper. So that price, that house would have probably been 200,000. Right. So what's going to happen when they try to sell that house and the market comes back down to normal?
Right. And I guess that's the justification for doing compliance-based assessments, is that we're never chasing blips in the market that occur like that. Is that going to be a sustained? I'm not the economist here to say if that's going to be sustained. I know there's a lot of talk about prices coming back to earth this November. A lot of talk about the real estate market, about whether or not it could keep up and that type of thing. That's predicting the future. If we fall out of compliance next year, and then naturally we came back into compliance just because the market declined in value or wasn't appreciating at a clip that it was before, then this whole schedule resets. The other important thing to remember is you shouldn't look at it like a revaluation as being new revenue to the city. This is just making sure that your records are accurate and that you're assessing appropriately according to state statutes, which in this case says that you're representing market value. So for your particular case, if we were to do a citywide revaluation based on this current market, it would be appropriate for me to consider market values and costs that are occurring now and bring values up to that. 5 years down the road, hindsight being 2020, then your ratio might be, over 100%, and you're over assessing properties in comparison to where the market is at that time. But again, to think of, right now we're under assessing properties. Back up 8-9 years ago, 10 years ago, we were over assessing properties. The city is going to collect, the state, county, school, they're going to collect what they need in their budget, and that affects taxes. What the assessments are doing is breaking out what is collected based on the proportion of the value of your property, how much of that levy you're going to contribute as a property owner. So moving these numbers with the market saying, okay, now these homes are selling for 300,000 versus 250 10 years ago. You're representing the market, but if you're making consistent changes throughout the city, your mill rate and your tax rate will be offset, and they're going to still be paying similar taxes, but now you better represent the market value of that property. Did that come out right? I'm not sure if I'm explaining that.
So,
So to answer your question, I don't know if we want to get into the game of trying to time it with economy, there's those type of statistics. It's more, we're out of compliance. It's time to do it. It was a unique case several years ago when you were switching assessors and you felt that there needed to be corrections applied. And that's kind of more unique for municipalities to do a revaluation for those purposes. Most time it's related to these numbers and saying, are we, in compliance or not in compliance? So.
and that's why the state gives you that 10% leniency, because it does change. It can change. I mean, that's a nice amount of time that gives you that ability to go up and down. So you're at 92, you're at 94, you go down to 94, you're at 98. And it gives you that little bit of cushion there to ride that market that you're talking about instead of chasing it.
Put it this way too, we ended up doing the 2017 revaluation over 2 years, 2016 and 2017. So you got to keep in mind, we started work, I don't know when you were doing that. So we probably started talking about this in 2015. I started my legwork in 2016. My office work was based on sales in 2015. So we're already looking at data that's in the past. And what happened, halfway through that revaluation, we had started making this framework of a model and kind of predicting of what needed to happen in the overall numbers. It changed halfway through. It went from, oh my gosh, we need to bring these values down in some areas of the city to, oh my gosh, everything's appreciating much faster. That turning point happened during the revaluation. 2016 is when things really started taking off. So even then we had to make adjustments. We still came in at just barely above 100%, meaning we were representing pretty close to market value on most properties. But we did have to adjust our model at the end to kind of squeak it in, because we were probably going to come in too short, too low of values, based on how the market turned during the actual process of the reval. So again, I wouldn't time it that way. I would look at it more, we need to stay in compliance as far as what state assessments require, or state statutes require pertaining to assessments. I don't like to make it out as something that's a new revenue gainer, because there is this balancing between your mill rate, what you're going to be collecting, and then what the aggregate assessment is and how that all works. Getting into the different types of revals, what they break that down to is your confidence level in the quality of the current records. So if you have low confidence in your current records, obviously you'd want to do a full interior, vice versa, market update. The other change I know I mentioned to the board of the review is that it is more difficult for assessors to gain entrance into properties. When we did the last revaluation, I could really use board of review as the leverage to say, you cannot object to this property if you don't let me in. It's been taken away. They can object whether they let me in or not. So that may impact your decision of what type of revaluation you'd want to go for. But it's those details, once we get a little bit closer. Right now is what I wanted to do is make you aware that we're close to falling out of compliance. And then that timing, that 6-year clock is going to start ticking. I know Judy's practice in the past was to start planning ahead of time, even in the budgeting process.
Because how much was the last one? 100?
The last one, just for the revaluation, it's a little misleading, just for the revaluation for the work was 75, but then there was 5 for mailing on that. Plus then we break it into 2 parts of contracts. Then there's the normal maintenance work, which we do every year, which added on about another 20. So by the time you get that, it's about 105 was the last one, somewhere in there roughly.
So then for budgeting reason or purposes, what I usually will do is at the end of the year, when we're talking about, we have X amount of dollars, hopefully left in our general fund. One of the things I like to do is throw 20,000 towards that reassessment we know is going to happen in the future. Because as you know, when we get to our capital budget, it has all these other things going on and other needs. So I don't want this big $100,000 assessment to overburden in that 1 year, all of our capital money. So you will hear me, probably within, so we're talking 2027. So, back it up, coming back here in about 3 years, I'm gonna start saying 20,000 or 10 or whatever I can throw at it. So it doesn't hit us in that year and things go up every year. So it just is smart budgeting practices to think about those kind of expenditures over years than just pushing it on a capital budget all at one time.
I just want to circle back to, because the one thing that you would be correcting, because I made this point that it's not new revenue. When you do a full interior though, what your intent is to look for like unpermitted work that was completed. So a lot of new homes, they end up finishing off the basements without building permits just to make sure our record's accurate. So there is some degree of picking up stuff we were unaware of before when we do a full interior inspection. But to Judy's point, this is more planning purposes. The decision about full exterior market, that's more down the road. One marketing thing I would say though is, some people talk about guaranteed 100% assessing. That's not something that I'm a believer in. So there are assessors that will charge you more per year and guarantee that you'll never have a revaluation. That can be done, but what they're supposed to be doing, if that's the type of contract that they signed, is each year they should be adjusting their assessed values to stay in line with the market. And I think what they're actually doing is only adjusting the assessments to the properties that actually sold, so that statistically it looks like you're in compliance. But if you get down into looking at all properties, you're not actually in compliance. So for instance, you have two 1970s ranch homes sitting right next to each other, built by the same builder. This one sold recently, so it's assessed at whatever, 212,000, what they're going for now. And this one hasn't been sold since 2009 and it's at 130,000. So that's what you have to be careful about when you're guaranteed full assessments each year, is are they actually going to be doing the work? Because it takes a lot of work to do a whole city every year, and all the different market segments that are changing and all the different property types that are happening too. So I feel this is the best way to do it, is like, especially avoiding these blips where, in our current situation with COVID and supply shortages, is this something we want to be chasing in the short term, or, this compliance-based assessment where it might smooth itself out over time? So does anybody else have any more questions? If you let me go, I'll keep going. So now's when I loop back around and start talking about the same stuff again. So any more questions for me? Does that cover what you wanted me to?
Very good. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it.
Adam.
Thanks, guys. Have a good evening.
Appreciate it.
On to the audit presentation by Casey Smits, CPA Supervisor, Johnson Block and Company. Casey?
Good evening, Casey.
Hi there. My name is Cassie Schmitz. I am an audit supervisor here in the Mineral Point office at Johnson Block. I've been working with the city on the audit team for over 5 years now, and pleased to be joining you to present the results of the 2020 audit. Are you seeing the presentation that I have listed here?
Not yet.
Okay, let me make sure I share my screen. All right, how about now?
Yep.
Cool. All right, in this presentation, I plan to summarize the audit and highlight some of the major financial changes for the city for 2020. Our audit report is nearly 100 pages in length, so this summarized information will give you a much quicker overview of the 2020 financials. We've provided copies of our audit report to the city, and I believe I saw them in the packet for this meeting.
Yes, they are in there.
Okay, so feel free to review that document in further detail. Normally we come on site mid-March for our audit fieldwork. If you remember back to March of 2020, the state shut down because of the pandemic. And it shut down right before we were going to have our audit fieldwork. So most of our 2019 audit was performed remotely. This year we got back on site and were able to meet face-to-face with city personnel, which we really enjoyed. We weren't able to come for the St. Patrick's Day festivities, but looking forward to getting back and taking part in some of those activities in the future. Like I said, we have performed our audit of the city's financials for the year ended December 31st, 2020. We issued an unmodified, which is sometimes called a clean opinion on the financial statements, which means that we believe the financial statements were in all material respects presented in accordance with GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. We prepare the financial statements using information provided by the city and propose certain journal entries during the course of our audit. Management has reviewed and accepted that information. We also issued a separate smaller document that goes along with our audit report, designed specifically for the council. It contains certain required communications and other information that we'd like to just highlight and bring to your attention.
That was the information that Nicole sent under separate cover. So you received the packet and then she sent that out under separate cover, that so that you guys just received that and not everyone.
Okay. Looking at the highlights for 2020 for the city, overall, governmental funds reported an increase in fund balance of almost 2.4 million. I have listed here the funds that had the largest changes in the year, but the big driver to that overall increase in governmental fund balance is due to the capital projects fund and the debt that was issued in the fall of 2020. Those bond proceeds were over $2.3 million, and not a lot of expenses were incurred in 2020. And as those proceeds are spent, we can kind of expect in the future years to see that fund balance start to come back down as those expenditures are incurred. Otherwise, for 2020, we see increases in the fund balance for the general fund, library and museum, environmental, TID, and debt service funds, as listed on this page. A decrease in the community development fund of about 217,000 was due to the city's participation in the CDBG close program with the state, along with about 155,000 from the general fund. The community development fund sent about 280,000 to the state and anticipates receiving those funds back to fund some future projects.
And those are the projects that we talked about back here. So that's what she's talking about when we sent that information to the state for those CDGB funds. Oh, and the parks projects. So it was not just this, but it was a park projects also.
Specifically looking at the general fund in regards to the budget, we see favorable budget to actual comparisons. The overall revenues were higher than what was budgeted, and the expenses were lower than what was budgeted. And then there was a transfer of nearly 350,000 from the general fund to the capital projects fund during the course of 2020. And looking specifically at the utilities, both the electric and water utility and the sewer utility reported increases in their net position for the year. This slide shows the trend in the general fund balance for the last 5 years. And actually, it's somewhat deceiving because it appears that the fund balance is negative over the course of those 5 years. And I probably should have included a 6-year trend because if we look back to 2016, there was a successful TIF district that was closed out. And as a result, the general fund was received approximately $945,000 as a result. And then in 2018, the city approved to transfer about 1.2 million over to the capital projects fund. So if we look back all the way back to 2015, the fund balance at that point was 5.2 million. So in that 6-year trend, the city has had a consistent increase in the general fund balance.
But what this can show you is we are currently working on 2 TID districts within the city. So when those TID districts close, you can see the influx of revenue into the city. When that's the benefit of having TID districts, and to know when they're going to close and utilize those funds and keep an eye on when that closure is. It's really imperative that that happens because you'll see this influx of money for a couple of years and you can utilize those to do a lot of things. So a lot of positive things when those TID districts actually close.
Mm-hmm. So at the end of the year, December 31st, 2020, we see about $6.3 million in total general fund balance. The unassigned portion of this fund balance that hasn't been designated for other purposes represents approximately 52% of the total 2020 general fund expenditures. And we look at this as part of our audit procedures as a kind of a compliance procedure. The city has a policy to meet a 25% minimum amount and definitely was in compliance with the 52%.
And one of the reasons, and I know I've talked about this before, that we hold more dollars in our general fund in that unassigned fund balance is because of the month in which we receive most of our shared revenue from the state of Wisconsin, which is close to almost I believe it's 2.7 million. So what would happen is if we didn't have such a flush fund balances, we'd have to go out and we would have to borrow money. So just to make our payments before that November payment from the state of Wisconsin. So we look at it, I know it says 25% as a minimum, but really is beneficial to us to hold as much as we receive from the state of Wisconsin in that shared revenue dollar amount.
Moving on, this slide represents general fund revenues. At the top of the slide, we have a 3-year comparison of the revenue sources for the past 3 years. And then the pie chart below shows it's just a graphic presentation of the sources of revenue for 2020 only. Looking year to year, the city receives approximately the same percentage of total revenues from each source. In 2020, we saw a slightly larger amount coming from the intergovernmental sources, mostly due to the routes to recovery aid that was received for approximately $125,000. The largest pieces of this pie graph and the largest revenue sources of the city come from taxes and intergovernmental revenues, as you can see on that pie chart. This slide, similar to the last one, is representing general fund expenditures of the city. Top portion, we have the trend for the past 3 years for the expenditures of the city, and the pie chart below shows the breakout of 2020 expenditures. Overall, we're seeing the percentages remaining relatively consistent year to year. The biggest changes I've already touched on. The general fund sent $155,000 to the state as part of that CDBG close program in 2020. And there was a large transfer in 2018 that made up 17% of the expenditures, and that was transferring over to the capital projects fund. But overall, not too many changes as far as the percentage of total goes between years. If I were to create a pie chart here for 2019 or for 2018, they would be relatively consistent. Here we're looking at the long-term obligations of the city and the increases and decreases for 2020. The governmental activities are shown in the top part of the top section of the slide, and the business type activities and the utilities are shown below. There were 2 new bonds issued in 2020, which represents the largest activity in this section for the year. The $2.3 million issuance as part of the governmental activities section was for the capital projects fund. And there was also a bond refinancing in 2020 for the water and electric utility, which refunded a 2011 bond. And this probably was already mentioned, but the economic gain as a result of that refunding was nearly $1 million. And the purpose for the refunding was to kind of take advantage of some of the lower interest rates in 2020. The state restricts the amount of general obligation debt the city can have. And for 2020, this limit was approximately $20 million. As of 12/31/20, the city only had $10,495,000 subject to the limitation, which that amount actually reflects the governmental bonds and notes above. The utility bonds are not subject to this limitation. In conclusion, we saw the city overall has a favorable fund balance and has some capacity to borrow if needed. I mentioned earlier that there is a separate packet issued to the council members that you received that includes our audit communications. I'm not going to go into detail on the contents, but I wanted to touch on a section relating to the environmental remediation TIF district, which is set to close in 2022. And currently the city is expecting the fund to have a deficit fund balance at the end of its life. The deficit must be absorbed by the general fund when that fund is closed. And currently the estimated amount is going to be approximately $195,000 that'll have to be covered by the city. We already saw that the city's total fund balance is healthy, has $3.6 million of unassigned fund balance, meeting the minimum fund balance policy of the city. So I don't think there's any concerns that the general fund will be able to cover the deficit. Just something that I wanted to make you aware of, and I'm sure Judy has already made you aware that that's coming down the line.
Actually, in the audit, it shows the unassigned net of that.
What was that, Judy?
In the actual audit, it shows the unassigned fund balance net of that payout of that obligation. So it does
Right.
clearly show what fund balance would be at less than that deficit within TID. But that is our environmental TID, which is now the Beacon Street cottages. So that's the TID district she's talking about. Just so you know, we never anticipated that TID district to come out of debt. And we're actually thrilled that we have those Beacon Street cottages out there that are paying back some of the money that we put into getting that area's environmental concerns taken care of. So sometimes we do TID districts for more than, just a reason of of making money at the end of it. We do, the government is here to clean things up sometimes that people leave behind, and that was one of them. So, like I said, we really never expected to get our money out of that TID. And when the cottages came in and built over there, it gave us back. So it's about 16,000, $16,000 or $13,000 a year for the last 5 or 6 years. So it's actually, I look at it as a win that we took in money we never expected. And we received those great cottages for our community. So there's a little history on that one.
As always, we appreciate the help of all city staff. We received full and complete cooperation of all city personnel during the course of our audit. I appreciate you letting me present the results of the audit today. If you have any questions, I can answer them.
Anyone have any questions? If you don't have any questions today and you come across something in the audit, in this information that you have any questions about, please shoot me an email. If it's communication you want to have straight with our auditors, that's not a problem either. They are willing to answer any questions. So with that, if there's no other questions, thank you very much, Cassie. Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Cassie.
Judy. Thank you.
All right, next up is the review and recommend to council updates to the video producer job description. Chad?
I'll take this one. So in your packet, you'll find a updated job description. It's a red line job description to show what the changes are recommended from the last time we offered this with Casey. I'm just going to kind of go through a couple of the major changes. If there was minor changes, just a word here and there, I mean, those are the type of things we just kind of do internally and then offer the position. But these got quite a few different changes going on, so we wanted to bring it up for approval of committee and council. So first of all, we wanted to throw in the name of marketing producer in there as well, because we know with Casey, how much marketing did he do for the community? So we want to kind of promote that as being a part of the essential part of the job. So video and marketing producer would kind of be the new title. One of the other changes would be in the note section. So the 1, 2, 3, or the 4th section down on note, it says this position is not included in the labor union contract, which is staying the same. But we crossed out the line of this position is not exempt from FSLA overtime requirements. So does everybody know the difference between exempt and non-exempt, the positions? So an exempt position like myself and Judy, we're not eligible for some of those FSLA overtime requirements, whereas a non-exempt employee, which most of the employees that we have in the community do work their 40 hours and they get overtime. We're going to propose that this position, based on the uniqueness of this position, could be an exempt position. And when I say could be an exempt, there are certain qualifications that the federal government says that can be exempt. It's basically the type of duties, the amount of pay that the individual receives. And in this type of job, one of the requirements would be if the individual has a certain type of education or certification for the job. So what we would like to do is when we offer this job, we would like to make an exempt position because there's a lot of flexibility in what the person does. I mean, they're constantly coming here to there. They might be working weekends. This individual could be over weekends, responding to certain media posts that are out there. So it gives us an opportunity to and flexibility for the position if it's a exempt position. However, after reviewing with CIVMIC and getting their input and kind of looking at the requirements, we would only be able to do that if they have a certification or an education degree in this field. So depending on the candidates that we get and depending on who applies, if the position fully qualifies and the person does have some type of education or certification, we're going to probably more than likely make them an offer to be an exempt position. If the top candidate does not have that certification or degree, then by the law, we can't make it a exempt position, then we would have to have it as a non-exempt position. So we won't know until we get the candidates in and see if they have that education or degree. So that's one thing we're kind of looking at moving forward with this. Another would be that the position used to report to the Director of Parks and Rec, and then it was Director of Public Services. I'm proposing right now just to make it directly as a city administrator, because remember we modified a bunch of things between the Parks and Rec and Public Works Director to split them up. This is one thing that to take it off the hat of the Parks and Rec Director so they can focus on other things, and just make the position report directly to the city administrator. And then you can see a bunch of the other things that are in the position that we changed, and basically based off of what Casey's successes were, what they were doing in social media and marketing, and just updating the position based on, we want the continued success of what we saw from Casey. So we want to continue those type of things. With that said, that's what it kind of is in a nutshell. Any questions? Otherwise, we would ask that you guys make a recommendation to council to have this reviewed by council.
So back to the exempt thing.
Yep.
Basically, Casey was punching a clock. He was, doing 9 to 5 or whatever. And I can see how that'd be difficult because you're covering, this and that, evenings, weekends and whatever. So you're proposing with the right degree, they wouldn't be punching the clock, right? They'd just, work as they, their salary basically, not.
Correct. So Casey was an hourly employee. Casey was a salary employee, but it was basically an hourly employee in the mindset that he would work 40 hours, but everything over 40 hours, he would get overtime. Whereas an exempt position, we are still, expected to work at least 40, if not more, in our jobs. But it wouldn't be that exact punching a clock, and that this position would not make overtime if it was exempt, if the position worked over 40 hours in a week. You basically get your
That makes
salary.
sense. Like you said, with social media and stuff, he'd be responding all hours of the day,
Yep.
not just between 9 and 5. So.
And we're not going to expect this person to be on social media at 2:00 at night and responding to those type things. I mean, that's not the expectation, but it does give a little bit of flexibility. This person, if you're exempt employee, you can be checking some things at home. You can be checking your emails, which we do not allow for non-exempt employees. If you're hourly, you're home, you're not working unless you're called in. Whereas some of the exempt employees like ourselves, we're called in, we're doing some things at home to make sure we're doing our job. So to your point, yes, exempt employee would not be making overtime. But again, we won't know until we find out what the candidates are and if they have the right credentials to be qualified as exempt.
Any other questions for Chad? I'll entertain a motion.
Motion will be to take this to council as it changed. Also move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Chad.
Thanks.
Next up is discussion on retaining wheel tax action, if any. Judy?
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is go through wheel tax, the report one more time and kind of talk about it. And Mr. Roberts had requested that we put this again on the agenda for discussion and action if you so choose. So again, here's our wheel tax. This is for 2021. Our budget is 127. We're at 44,695. I have a list of some of the things that wheel tax has paid for. In the bottom, projects completed with wheel tax dollars. We have Northridge Drive, Cedar Street, High Street Crossing, and the Industrial Loop Crossing. And currently we are looking at Shawano Street. We received a grant and this is going to meet the difference. And then to know that we do have a number of items in the future that we're looking at to utilize this funding. Spur Road, Avon, Lyman, and Lion Street. That's over here where we received some grant money. We're hoping that if we don't have enough in grant money, it'll meet some of that gap. And then the North Water Street Bridge is something that the county brought forth that eventually will need some work. So with that, I just wanted to present what the wheel tax looks like for the city and what we're thinking about for the future with it. And then you guys can go ahead with your discussion and then go from there.
So I did bring this up a couple of meetings now. And I've voiced my hearing from the city, how it's not very popular. And also I was kind of curious on how it's being spent. Northridge and Cedar are over there behind by the family diner. And we just put in, I don't know, 20 some homes at the time. And I'm sure all plumbing and all that had to be done, so that those streets had to be done because of all the development. I know we were at economic development and Jeff Hunchke was here and he said that he developed some land and he had to pay for the street in the past. This was years ago. So I guess maybe we could have had the developer pay for that. Same with the crossings, High Street Crossing, Industrial Loop. I don't know if there was a discussion with the rail and said, hey, you know, the street is tore up because of your railroad. Is there any, I don't know if they chipped in.
And they did.
They did.
It was a partnership
Okay.
project. Yep.
So I know we're having a lot of more development coming to town. There's going to be a lot more tax revenue, which is nice. I'm happy to see that. And so with that, I would like to make a motion to dissolve the wheel tax.
Ask for a second.
Motion's been made to dissolve the real tax. Is there a second?
The only point that I'll bring in before a second comes out, that if you do decide to dissolve it, you might want to consider doing it as a sunset clause. For example, we are currently working on the Shawano Street project that's been bid out. We have these expenses or these budget numbers planned for the Shawano Street project. However, Judy, correct me if I'm wrong, we haven't collected all of that for 2021 yet.
Correct.
So if you would dissolve it right now, there would be a gap in what we expect to collect to pay off the Shawano Street improvement for this year. So, but that's just a consideration for you guys to know that we've got the Shawano Street project bid out already, and that's in the works. So depending on where you guys want to go, I want to make sure you guys are aware of that.
Can I amend my motion to just get rid of the wheel tax at the end of paying out Shawano Street?
So I gotta ask again if you changed it.
You can, yep. Is there a second?
Is there a second? Without a second, then it's quashed, right?
I mean, I wouldn't mind discussing the wheel tax to the people that I've talked to. You know, they feel like it's unfair. And I know you had brought up that, I don't know, utility one or something, which would be more evenly balanced throughout the city.
And it is something that, that's one of the things we did discuss the last time we brought it up, was if we're gonna talk about possibly just, you know, not taking in the wheel tax dollars, maybe we should consider other revenue sources. Now, increasing taxes is not an option because we're under tax levy constraints. So they're really, the only other option at this point that I can think of is to put additional dollars on the, you know, on the sewer, water, electric bill. So that is an option. Whether you wanted me to take a look at that before you decided whether you wanted to repeal this wheel tax, I can do that. If you want me to go back and say, okay, if we added $10 to every residential, I'm gonna do, just so you know, if I go back and do this, I'm gonna do it really high level. I'm gonna tell you right now, it's really not popular. Clintonville went through it. I think I have to be, I've been through some training on this and some meetings on this with other communities. And I think the biggest problem is that people don't understand what's happening to them. And they make it so complicated. And you were gonna do 6 linear feet of 12 linear. Come on, if you're gonna tax people, explain to them why you're being taxed, and your residents, you're gonna pay 10, your business, you're gonna pay this. And it has to be a real clear understanding of why you're taxing people. And it can't be some big formula that half of the citizens in your community can't even understand.
Was it
So-
like a flat fee
Yes.
type
Yep,
thing?
added to your electric, water and sewer bill.
I mean, and if it would be, enough so it would be comparable to what you collect with the wheel tax, but this way it's just dispersed evenly.
So I can take a look at that. I can look at how many residential properties we have, and if it's $10, is this gonna cover what the wheel tax had? But then again, and then we also hit nonprofits, just, so churches, and they also pay, which is fair because they're utilizing the roads also. But, so I would take a look at all of the parcels within the city, what's the business dollar amount, what's the real simple. What's the residential, what's the business? Not saying that's what we're gonna do, so don't hold my feet to the fire, but just to take a look at it at a really high view and say, okay, if we added $10 to residential, 20 to business, or 10 to business and 20 to residential, and then what to commercial and, manufacturing, so you have all this separate, that Adam went through tonight. So I'd take all the categories. Chad and I would sit down and just kind of think through it at a real high level, what makes sense to us talking about it. And then I would present it and say, this is what it would look like. Now, if I can't add $5 or $10, it's really not worth our time. So I'm going to say, well, maybe I'm going to double the money, but this would make most sense. So we'll just come up with some kind of sensible plan for it and then take a look at it. And so maybe hold tight to this. We'll have that discussion and then see where we can go in the future.
Because people, they just think the wheel tax is unfair because this family has 5 kids and they got 5 vehicles, and then this, grandma has nothing, I don't know.
10 times 12 is 120. If you add $10 to everybody's light bill, that's $120. I'd rather pay the $20 wheel tax than pay
Well, it doesn't
$10
have
on my
to be
bill.
Necessarily, I would want to keep it comparable, but more evenly dispersed.
Another thing that's a little unfair right now is that the ATVs can use the roads and the ATVs are not being taxed.
I've had some complaints about that, but I just tell people they're not as big as cars and trucks.
I think they would tear up the roads more than cars with some of the tires they have on them.
Myself, when I went around 4 years ago for re-election, I never got a complaint. People told me I am willing to pay that, providing it's used for roads. And we passed here at council that the wheel tax would strictly be used for roads. Now, I also strong suspicion that your utility bills will be going up in the next year. So now you're gonna get that. And if you've got people complaining about the wheel tax, I hate to think of what we're going to hear when we walk out and say, we are going to raise your utility bills. I think we're gonna get more feedback, more.
Billy,
I'm gonna tell
you
you,
brought up the fact of if you have more people living in your house. I had 4 kids, my wife and mine, that's 6 vehicles. We paid for it.
Right.
And and do so because we had 6 vehicles on the road.
Right.
Grandma is only paying for 1, but she only drives 1 car.
Right.
Right now, if you assess everybody, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Everybody's gonna pay the whole thing equally, like you said. Okay,
Then you're
Is
gonna
that-
punish people that don't have cars.
exactly. Is that necessarily, I mean,
We do have people that don't have a
But they
car at all
still
that just walk.
have to use the the road.
The
Amazon there's a truck. guy
The
there that-
Amazon
all he
truck.
does is walk.
Crossway. No,
All he
you
does
gotta
is
use
walk.
that crosswalk.
The
They're
good.
looking at
Yeah,
it.
but you can't charge the people that don't have a vehicle. Plain and simple. Well. It's just like say if you had a dog, okay, you gotta buy a dog license. And Johnny doesn't have one, you're gonna make him buy a dog license, it's on the same principle.
I just know that
There's no really, it's more or less like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Yeah.
But to try to just make it,
I agree with everyone, and I commend Tim for sticking to his guns and really sticking on this, because I know that he's passionate about making, it's a bad PR tax. It's called wheel tax. It's just an ugly name. But what I kind of stuck by all along is it's a large pizza on a Saturday night. It's $20. And I know that people are irritated with it, but it's brought almost $500,000 for roads in New London. And whether I would, and don't take any offense because the motion didn't receive a second, Tim, but personally, I would feel better not removing something until we got some kind of something in its place, or whether we take that high level look at everything. I like pie graphs. I can really understand good pie graphs. I honestly would kind of like to really go back and dig through the digital archive and find out what New London was spending on roads prior to the wheel tax. And taking like, not considering bonding issues, major road projects, Wyman Street, Division Street. What did we budget for fixing potholes, roads? What did it even look like before when we didn't swallow the assessment for sidewalks and curb and gutter? Now that's another thing that, there's a lot of factors when
We
you
had a lot
start
more
looking
employees to help.
at
do
the
it too.
high level things. And I remember when I swear there used to be 20 people working for the streets division.
Mhm.
Now it's like 5 if you can't even count that. What they're really dedicated to just streets. So looking at the whole big thing, because sometimes I think even in my mind, so if we say we did the wheel tax and that brought in what, 98,000 or 100, let's just assume $100,000. The last thing that was intended to do is free up money out of the general fund so that we could buy a copier or something like that. I want to see an actual picture of, this is what the New London spent on roads prior to the wheel tax, and now here after the wheel tax. Yeah, I can see these roads that we stuck money into, but I want some kind of proof in my heart that we didn't just play a shell game there. And that wheel tax money is above and beyond what we were budgeting. That's what it should be. That's what we sold it as when we said, hey, it's a pizza, it's a large pizza a year. So that kind of stuff. And then maybe have a different way to explain it than to just have a list of 5 roads that have been done. I don't know.
Judy, can you put something like that together? Do you have that information that you can dig into?
And at the same time, there would be another pie graph, because this is what we talked about a lot when we were trying to get people to agree to vote for a wheel tax. Was that governmental funding, I don't know, it was
Shared revenue.
a couple of administrations ago or something, but road tax or highway aids from the state were going like this. So I'd like to see that graph overlapped with our graph of how our spending went. And if anything, I got more ammunition to talk to people responsibly about it than to just say, hey, man up, it's a movie ticket. It's a large popcorn and a ticket to the movie, or a pizza. But
I commend you for sticking to your guns, Tim.
A lot of people feel that the wheel tax was not needed. It was, hey, Appleton has a wheel tax. Hey, we should do that. Hey, whoever has a hotel tax, we should do that. And it's just all ways to, tax and tax and tax. And once they got the wheel tax approved, then you're like, well, how should we spend it? And I don't think these projects that it was spent on was a very high profile project enough for the community to feel, okay, hey, I don't mind, because, like I said, I feel like the Northridge and Cedar could have been, maybe the developer could have kicked in a little more because they had to put in all new sewer and water. I don't know.
Can I correct you on that part?
Mhm.
Now, I know the guy that used to own Northridge. And all the sewer laterals and the water laterals and the streets, he paid for it
Okay.
when it initially was built. And all your sewer and water were stubbed into the lots. My mom had a house out there when they did curb. She built the house, and when we lived there, it was a gravel road. And when that got paved, my mom was assessed for curb and half the blacktop. But I remember she worked at St. Joe's, not a lot of money. She was crying about that assessment. Took her a long time to get that paid off, but yeah,
Even so, if 20 houses go in there, say $4,000 a year in tax revenue per house, 20 houses, that's $80,000 you would have paid for your wheel tax to pave those roads in 1 year.
well, the actual amount we would collect on tax on that we kind of had that discussion here last
Right,
month.
so $7 every 100,000 in value. So that's what we collect as a city.
So it doesn't get very
So
far.
like,
No.
for example, a $3.8 million development, we might get.
So $2,000.
In your opinion.
About $2,000. Yeah, so it's really, we can do a lot. And I was talking about the fact that on our levy, any net new construction is our increase in what we see for a levy increase. In the last couple of years, well, the biggest one was when we closed our TID district and we got $54,000. And every year from then on out has only been $24,000. So you need a heck of a lot of value in order to bring in a lot of tax revenue. So there isn't I wish that it was bigger than what it was, but it really takes a lot of value to bring in a lot more tax revenue. Because we have other jurisdictions within, I know it's 24, almost $25, but you have the school in there and both counties and Fox Valley Technical College getting a piece of that pie also. So, and we're probably second, so the school, then us, and the county's creeping up on us too, so it depends.
Something we want to consider just as you're kicking this around, where you want to go with things. I mean, like Tim talked about, the wheel tax, it's money, but it hasn't been a ton of money. It hasn't been something that enough for big profile type things. So in the back of your head, if you want to look at changing this, how much money do you really need to bring in to make a difference to show the community what's going on? I mean, do you want to bring in $500,000 a year? But Judy, what would that be? That'd be, a good chunk of money, in a transportation utility or whatever. So there's a balancing act between, okay, how much you want to tax or how much you want to charge, like in a fee, compared to what you want to get out of it too. So you want to try to bring in $500,000 a year and hit half of a Warner Allen project every year and really promote that as showing the community that boom, these things are getting done.
And if you do that, then you have to think, okay, so it's $3 million for this road. So we bond, then we're taking in a half. So then are we gonna bond every 6 years? And then it's really a great cycle if you can bring in $500,000 in 1 year, bond every 6 years. So you don't want to do that very often because it's expensive. So then you say, okay, all of this $500,000 is dedicated to just roads, and we can do a $3 million project every 6 years. I mean, that is really a way to show people that the money that you're spending or the money that you're paying you're going to see it.
You think
But
there's
you
an
almost
uproar
have to
over
get
a
that.
wheel tax?
I'm sorry.
You think there's an uproar over the wheel tax, try to raise it to
Well, the
$500,000
Clemens
a year?
taxes are not like crazy. I mean, it's not like it's a,
I think the biggest thing with the wheel tax is the state of Wisconsin keeps raising your registration fees, so.
At the
Yeah,
same
that's-
You know,
right.
yes.
So it's like when you
Then
write
you're
out that
paying-
registration check, it's like,
Agree.
you just take, if you could take the $20 wheel tax off, then my registration should be under 100. See, now it's over
They
100.
don't want to
so
pay for wheel tax, but they want the brand new roads to drive on is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
It's a,
Unfortunately, that's usually, yeah.
Right, and they don't want to pay for them.
And keep in mind what Johnny said before is one form of revenue we are not bringing in right now is the assessments. So we are not assessing for curb and gutter. We are not assessing for sidewalk. We're not assessing for, so you need to make that up somewhere else because we're not doing that. Now, Judy just made the point where the transportation utility isn't very popular. Nina just went through it and I was on a Zoom meeting with the mayor from NIA. And they went to the transportation utility, what Clintonville was talking about, and their philosophy, the way they did it was they took away the assessments and they added on the transportation utility. So instead of someone getting a $30,000 bill when they did their project, everyone was paying the $10 a month or whatever they charge for that. And he said that went pretty slick. I mean, people were
As a
very,
community, then you're kind of all working
Right.
together.
they were much more supportive of not getting a $20,000 bill and just paying a little bit more. So they went to the transportation utility and did it. So keep in mind, we're not assessing. That's a big chunk of
There's
revenue.
no trade-off.
We already do not charge for that. So that,
That's,
we go back and say, okay, we're gonna get rid of the wheel tax, but now you're gonna pay for road and sidewalk in front of your house. I will not answer
No.
my telephone for 6 months. It will be flooded.
I
When
wouldn't-
I walked around and asked people, I had a guy walk up and he says, I got 4 vehicles. I do not mind paying $20 a vehicle as long as you use it strictly to fix the roads.
Another,
When I went around, I visited probably 80% of people in my district. I did not get a complaint on wheel tax.
another
And
portion,
I got, was just like I said, I do not mind paying that if you're gonna fix our roads.
another portion of that is people underestimate what our wheel tax brings in and what it actually does.
Right, it gets you like this far.
We've had a discussion
Expensive.
about a city block.
Right.
And our hopes are is once we start construction around here is to get that out to the public of how much a dump truck load is and how much the pavement cost and.
well, the Wyman Street or the Warner Allen Street, granted this includes the, underground and some of that utility work. I mean, that's $900 some dollars. The one block on Shawano Street, we're looking at over $100,000. I mean,
I mean, how many years of wheel tax is that?
about 100,000 a year, so you get about a block a year.
Yeah.
I-
I mean,
30.
Lot
that's
of
not really
blocks.
gonna cut it if you want your roads fixed.
so again,
It's
my
just a
point,
small
how much do you
portion.
want to bring in a year to make that difference?
Right.
I get that when you fix a road, you want to do it complete, the water, sewer,
It
everything.
it depends. It depends on the
Is there a
situation.
way that maybe we could just use the wheel tax to just pave over the top?
Mhm.
That way we can do more and people aren't, getting whiplash going down Oshkosh Street. Is there a way we can just, put a Band-Aid on it for now? Yeah, I get it. It's not going to be done right. We might have to tear it up in a couple of years, but at least, you got a nice road to drive on.
And that's exactly right. So Shawano Street was a great candidate that we did the inspection of the utilities underneath. And the majority of it, we don't have to do. There are some catch basins on the corner of Cook and Shawano that we're going to replace, but for the majority of part of it, there's no utility work on that one. So that's your perfect example. We're just doing the road. Other situations, like Warner Allen, we had to change because there was, the last thing I want to do is do a road resurface project in 3 years, come back later and have to dig it back up because there was something we didn't identify. So for example, we've got a sinkhole at the middle of Oshkosh and Washington right now. You might see the cones right there. We just found it the other day. I'd hate to throw, new asphalt, all of that, and all of a sudden we never investigated. We didn't look at it. Now we got a sinkhole and we got to fix it. So I think to spend the money right, you have to investigate, but hopefully we find the streets that we don't need to do a lot of work on. Like when we do the ones over here for the Fifth Ward, we know those streets, the utilities are good underneath. We're just gonna be going in and doing those, the pavement projects. But like Warner Allen, yeah, we did have work. Division, yeah, we did have work. So I think the investigation part is important, but identifying some streets that we can just, go over the top and do a mill and overlay, yeah. That too.
Wheel tax is not paying to fix sewers.
No, use your sewer fund.
fund is.
Wheel tax is to
Just
fix
for
the roads. If we've got to fix sewers, that goes on your utility and they bond.
That's in
us.
your rate.
Wheel tax is not paying 1 penny to fix a sewer or to fix water, what's under there. So actually, we are using the wheel tax to put a surface on the road.
Just for the surface.
Well, we try to fix.
Storm sewer, yes. Storm sewer is included part of the road. So sanitary sewer and water is underneath on the utility bill, but storm sewer, because there's a lot of places that have a storm sewer utility fee on the utility bill.
That's been
But we don't have that. So road and storm sewer, because it's part of the washing away of that water on the road. That's part of the road surface cost,
And if you're doing that, you can use it for curb and gutter if you're doing curb and gutter,
part of the road.
right?
We've been picking roads where the wheel tax will do it. We've sat down, we spent hours going over what we think roads, how we rate them. And if we've got this amount of dollars and it'll fix this road, that's the one we're fixing with the wheel tax this year.
And Cedar and Northridge were those examples. We had a couple of sanitary sewer repairs that the sewer fund paid for Cedar and Northridge. We had a couple of storm sewer issues that we had to do repair, because I know we had a separated catch basin. So thank goodness we caught it, because if we would have did the road without checking it, we could have had another sinkhole and had a problem there. But those two are two other examples that they were just pretty much mill and overlays right over the top with spot repairs for the most part. So.
This kind of segues into the next item, and maybe I'm out of line asking about this, but how much of the American Rescue Plan Act money can be, if any, can be devoted or directed towards roads?
So,
Why don't you just go right into the
Are we
next
moving on to number
topic?
7 then?
all right.
I don't know.
All right, so now we're going to talk about the American Rescue Plan funding. So I just wanted you all to know, because it is a hot topic right now. You're probably going to see a lot of this in the newspaper, and other communities may be asking you. And yes, the city of New London did receive their first installment payment on June 25th in the amount of $371,154.70. We will be receiving the second payment next year. We have until 2024 but we would do it before then. We want to take time to decide what we're going to do with this money. It's pretty restricted. But one of the things Chad and I talked about is we'll call a capital meeting. We're not going to talk about that tonight, like how we're going to spend this money. We'll talk about some of the things we can spend it on, but hashing out how we're going to spend this money is not going to happen tonight. So we'll have a capital projects meeting, and that's where we'll begin discussion. We're not going to decide that night, but we're going to all come in with our ideas, and you can talk to your constituents or and maybe do some research on other communities and what they're doing with their money, but we can all come in and then make some choices about how we're going to utilize that money. One of the things I'm going to ask you to keep in mind as you decide how the city should be spending this money is that you need to stay away from operational expenses. They do allow for operational expenses, but you're going to get the city in trouble in the long run. So one of the things that you can do is you can give people plus $13 an hour, or you can hire people. Or you can do some things within your operation budget, but I'm gonna tell you that I would not do these things because they are unsustainable. So we're really gonna get ourselves in trouble. The area that I would, in particular, a couple of areas, take a look at is we can do sewer and water projects. Still doing some initial research on the road part of it. I read something that said, if it's part of the sewer and water project, we can put the road in. But now I found something that said storm sewer because it's connected to there. So maybe just a storm sewer project with the road. So a lot of this stuff, and if you guys want to go on and read about this, please find yourself at the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. There's tons of questions and answers in here about this funding, and it's going to tell you how we can utilize it. But some of them, and then it's funny how they say you can utilize it, but then keep in mind that we're not going to give you this money forever. And so make sure you're being smart about where you're putting it. But there are a couple places that you cannot use it, and that is you cannot offset tax rates. So you cannot reduce the tax levy with this money. That's not how they want you to spend it, and it cannot be put in any pension funds. So that's really a small requirement that you cannot use lease funds, but there's a revenue replacement provision that you're going to hear a lot. We can't do that. Fortunately, but unfortunately, I went through the calculation between, and I had Kurt Wojcinski from the League of Wisconsin Municipality, and I have the email back and forth with him. And I said to him, well, from 2019 to 2020, my shared revenue went up because they added that fence around the utility, and we went up like $25,000. Does that count? Yeah. Does the money count that I received additional dollars from our utility, like an extra 60,000? Does that count? Yeah. So we have no revenue. I wish we had some of the revenue side, the revenue replacement side, because then we could use that any way we wanted. Just because it replaced revenue from the 2019 pre-COVID to the 2020 post-COVID era. And I went through that calculation. I will do it again. At first I thought I could just pick and choose revenues. So I was picking all the recreational revenues and all the recreational expenditures, and I was comparing it. And then I got on, I went on first to a seminar that the league had. And then after the fact, I emailed Kurt and I said, it's full general fund revenue. And he said, yes, if you had increases in any of those items, they count. So I don't think we're going to get any benefit from that. So there are expenditures or negative economic impacts of COVID-19, including assistance to small businesses, household and hard hit industries and economic recovery. What I'm going to tell you is before you start doing these type of things or thinking about small business, there are a ton of money at the state level. So, and I'll bring this into capital. So the state already has a number of resources and a number of grants for small businesses. And they even talk about this in here. Be careful how you're going to, like, you might provide the money and then the state's providing the money. And basically all you're doing is giving the same program at the state level or municipal level, and you don't want to do the same things. So if a business were to come in and say, you know, I'm looking for COVID-19 CARES, or not CARES Act, but American Rescue Plan money, we would have the information for them to go to the state and apply for it. I wouldn't mimic what the state is already supplying money for. Okay, so and they talk about that in some of their pie charts and things, and then the premium pay for essential workers. Now, I don't think I would do this either, because when you talk about premium pay, the only people that would get it is the one who actually came to work every day. And I know that was very few of us. So anybody who worked from home is not included in the premium pay. It's just not I don't think it's okay for us to be giving money to people just because they came, you know, showed up to work versus working at home.
So they
It's
would
just,
get a raise for like until the money runs out or something?
you would just bump that, you can give them a bonus, you can give them up to $13 an hour, but not over $25,000. And I was like, oh boy. But yeah, I just don't think it's a good policy. What will cause is animosity amongst employees and friction or whatever you want to call it. I just don't think it's a good policy to pick and choose who was at work and who's going to say they weren't or they were, or no. And then again, it's an operational budgeting item and it's unsustainable. So you're gonna give somebody, a $13 raise this year and pay them that, and then, or go back and track who was actually here and give them $13 more an hour, and then pull it away from them next year. I don't know that
I'll
that's,
just go up in a tax bracket, get taxed more.
there you go.
The money that the city expended, I know it comes out of the cable fund, but all the equipment, possibly even Casey's wages the last year. And all of the city staff time to bring these committee meetings to the public, which was a very good thing that was gonna probably happen. But it was perfect timing with this COVID coming about to keep people connected and everything. So would that be eligible funds that was expended? Now we have that important access bridge for people should we get a flare up of COVID or anything, but we expended some money this last year on updating all that equipment and everything. Could that be?
It has to be something that you couldn't pay for, or something unbudgeted. So Casey's salary was budgeted and we didn't go over budget.
Yeah.
And they're actually looking at the revenue side loss and not expenditures.
Okay,
So we're only looking at revenues and not expenditures, where the money I got from the state only looked at expenditures. We got $121,000 last year. That was just expenditures and not revenues. So
okay.
now we flip sides, because everybody was really upset that they were only looking at expenditure side and not revenue side. So now this one only points to revenue side.
And all that equipment wasn't really for COVID relief or anything like that. The only thing that was really COVID is Zoom. So we're paying the Zoom, and I believe you use the Zoom charges for the last.
100, yep.
Yep, that was part of that money. We got some money back for it.
And part of why we weren't under budget last year, because we received the funding to make up, and then some for actually what we lost during
Things
COVID.
like
So we're really fortunate.
Upgrading park equipment, no, because that's not
No.
not a revenue.
Right. And we are doing some big park upgrades with the ADA projects coming up here pretty soon that we received grant funding for. So, and again, this is evolving. I do not know all the answers. I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen when we come into capital, but at that point, I hope to have like a list of, and one of the things that we should be doing is looking at our current capital, not recreating a wheel, and trying to give some relief to what we already need to get done. So I would suggest we kind of start there. Not saying that everything's listed on there. I know one of the things Chad did talk about that I thought was a really great idea was possibly putting in some windows up here for us. Some better bulletproof windows up front here like they have at the police department. Because people, tax time, we collect a lot of money. And I think just the way with things are going, that it would be really nice to be a little bit more protected when people come in. We have court people coming and going. We have court in this room. I know they had somebody in here one day because our judge it was pretty scary. Somebody was yelling and screaming at her. So it's just a thought and idea. So again, as you go around and talk to people and maybe other communities and get some ideas about how they're spending their money, but there is restrictions on it. And again, if you feel like going on the league website, it's all sitting out there. There's questions and answers, and maybe we can zero down on where we'd like to use. And then, so my next question is, would we like to start this conversation? I don't expect, and who knows what's going to happen, our next finance meeting to be too lengthy. So does Wednesday after finance next month work for us to start this discussion of a capital? Is Wednesday night not good for anyone to have a meeting of capital?
That would be Wednesday, August 4th.
Correct. And we would hold it right following finance. Because even though we do have time till 2024, and now we have, at first it was 2024, you had to have it expensed. Now they've pushed that to 2026. And then the other thing is the interest, although it's not much today. They haven't decided what we can do with that money yet. So I'm still kind of waiting on some guidance of what can we do with the interest that we gain on this. I would put it right into the fund. So another thing I have to do is I have to open a completely different fund for all the revenue and all expense for this money that came in. So that, because I'll have reporting, I'll have to send to either the state or federal government on an annual basis, or, saying what's sitting in that fund and what we plan to expense it on and all those kind of things. So I'll have lots of reporting that I'll need to do on a timely basis to them. But if we can begin that conversation next month after finance, we'll go ahead and do that if nobody has any objections.
Thank you, Judy. Finance Director monthly reports.
All right, so not too much has changed on these. So I can, I'm gonna go. My little thing on the bottom of these, I think I went to the, let's go here. Expenditures. Oops, I hit the wrong one. Sorry. It's up. Oh, I don't want to page through all this. It was like a complete book this time, wasn't it?
Mhm.
All right. So expenditures. So we would expect ourselves to be about 41.67% at 5 months. We're at about 42.88. So we are actually sitting very well at this point. I don't expect anything to be over budget. The one that we are keeping an eye on, and we've been talking about this, is equipment maintenance. We did get our new, and I did put this on here, our new mechanic over there, and he's doing some catch up on service. So we'll see where this ends up. And then general government actually is, if we look at this, is a little bit higher, and that's because we pay our insurance out at the beginning of the year. So that evens out over time. But if you look at any category, debt service is high because we have paid most of our payments already. It's not that we're gonna go over. So that kind of pushes up that percentage too. But otherwise, I don't see any line item that at this point that I have a concern about, except, and I'm not concerned about the equipment maintenance. You're concerned when you can't explain it, but there's, we can explain why that dollar amount is where that it's at. We'll just keep an eye on it. If we need to do some adjustments at the end of the year, I'll do those in February as I close out 2021. Anyone have any questions on any of those? And then we'll move to the revenue side. Have to go up and down, otherwise I have to page through all those pages. And at this point, our property tax revenue is at about 56%. We will be seeing the rest of that come in total in August, so that'll go to 100%. We do have a high dollar amount sitting in special assessments, but as I said last month, that on August, also as part of the tax settlement, we will be paying the utilities for some of those dollars. Tax equivalents come in at the end of the year, so that's why that one's really low. Again, shared revenue, we'll receive a small amount of that in July, and then the rest of it will come in November, so that's why that's small. Highways, we're at 50%. So again, I don't see anything. Interest is concerning to me. As we all know, interest rates have plummeted. We do have some investments that I put in here yearly instead of monthly. And so we will make up some of this, but interest may be something that we talk about as we continue through towards the end of the year and where we're at with that. At this point, that's the only thing that I can point to that I would expect possibly not to receive in total. Any questions on any of those? Then we'll go to designated and undesignated fund balance, and we're not going to go through every single one line item by line item because there hasn't been any change at all. The only thing I'll tell you that I will update is the unassigned fund balance, because I put estimates in here. Now that we have completed our audit, I will put in the actual amount from the 2020 audit. And as you can see, it's going to go up about $100,000. So we did see a $100,000 increase in our unassigned fund balance from last year. Otherwise, if nobody has any questions on those designated funds, this is where I will also eventually talk about putting some money aside for our assessment that Adam was talking about. I'll usually put like $20,000 a year. So again, when we get to that, we're not trying to come up with $100,000 for our assessment. And we have no choice to do those as you heard, and we have to be in compliance. It's the law. I'm not gonna go through wheel tax again. We've already been through that tonight. Capital bonding, and this is what the auditor was talking about when she said that we had $2.3 million more in assigned fund balance than we did in past years, and she talked about our bonding, and this was what she was talking about. And so here's all the projects that we're working on. I think some of them have been finished, especially at the police department. As we know, Warner Allen is just starting. City Hall roof projects, I'm not sure if we've seen all of those bills yet. Okay. Maybe. Sometimes some of those can take months before they come in. I don't understand why some of these contractors are so far behind in their billing processes, but who knows, in today's environment, maybe they also have employee shortages all over the place. So and then the Newton Blackmore's Trail, we should be getting started on. And then the library roof, we're waiting for still, I think, that tile roofing to come in. So that one might be a while, might be even next year or the year after. As long as I set it up as a payable, we'll be fine. And then we can explain it because of COVID-19. Any questions?
So if you don't get the tile, the roofing for the library until next year, but it was budgeted for this year, you don't pay it this year, you just have an excess in your
Correct.
general, okay.
Yep. So I'll hold on to those bond dollars until that it's paid. So it sits in our assigned fund balance. And that's why she said our fund balance was so large this year. And all of that had to do, that's why I show you guys this or prepare these financial statements for you each month, so you can see how our bonding dollars, how they're utilized, first of all, so that if someone asks you, I say, you took out you're working on Warner Allen, where are you getting all that money from? You can say, we took out this $2.3 million bond. Well, I thought you guys were gonna do this while we're waiting on the library roof, so you kind of have an idea where things are going. But yes, it will sit there. We do not prepay anything because we want to make sure that what we're getting for our money is inspected first. Any other questions on that? That's the end of that. So I'm going to move into my financial report. So spent a lot of time this month working on, well, first I finished up the audit. I completed the first 20 pages of the audit is on me. So once I get the finalized number, then I prepared that information for the audit. So I completed that. Chad, myself, Nicole and Missy have been spending a lot of time moving forward on our TID districts. So TID 2 and TID 3 and TID 4 will be presented this month. Actually, our first joint review board meeting is on the 22nd, Thursday, the 22nd at 4 o'clock. And we'll talk about moving forward in that process, but just making sure that that's being taken care of, because we have somebody who wants to break ground. So we need to get through the process before that can happen. I had my annual TID reporting. I have that annual joint review board meeting. I gathered the information, and I had the mayor come in aside for the American Rescue Plan funding. I've never had more phone calls from the state of Wisconsin on that. Apparently some people have still not, Bob was talking about, have still not gotten their paperwork in for their funding. So I'm guessing some of these townships just don't know. So
Extended at 30 days.
yeah, I was just shocked. The state is usually pretty hardcore about when their drop dead dates are. So updated information for tonight. I'm still working with MSB on trying to get our bank statement information. I think we figured that out, but once I get to my bank statement this month, I'll make sure that those dollars are coming in, and we should see a big influx in the boat launch daily income when I book those this month. Because I looked at it and it doesn't look any better than it. I was like, oh, something's not right here. I had to work on the perpetual care funds for the cemetery commission. I had, both Nicole and I were we were virtual, but in the office, but attended the, clerk, treasurer and finance officers, webinars. And then I attended a civic board meeting. And then everything else happens.
You brought up the boat launch. Is there any update on when we're getting those new docks?
Good question. I know I talked to Luke 3 or 4 weeks ago and they didn't have a timeline yet. I'm assuming just everything's behind, everything's back, but I'll ask him to see if he's got an update. I'll definitely get back to you on that. We'd like to get those kayak launch in there and promote that.
Any other questions? Not, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.